And then with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the time to Bridget. You got your, let's see. Oh, I got tons of people adding in. Okay.
All right. Everybody hear me? Good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share out my screen.
Bridget, you're on mute.
Thank you for letting me know. It looks like when I share my screen, it's muting me. Share. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep, we're working pretty good now.
All right. Sorry, everyone. Technical issues. Just a little bit of background on me. My name is Bridget Morales. I am the literacy specialist for Coral Academy of Science, Las Vegas. So we are a charter school. My particular campus is kindergarten through 4th grade. So those are the main grade levels I work with. I am a former teacher, so I was in the classroom for several years. I mostly taught 1st grade, but I also taught 3rd grade as well. And then I transitioned into the literacy specialist position when it became available at my campus. So this is my 3rd year as the literacy specialist. And I will say I have learned and grown so much in this position, not only with just how kids learn, but also helping teachers and supporting teachers. So that brings me to today. I had Kevin Laxalt reach out to me and she said, I think you would be so awesome to do this training. And I did not feel like I was an expert by any means. So I'm here to learn right alongside of you. I definitely look at myself as a lifelong learner. And definitely in the past couple of years, just with the science of reading and so many things changing, I look back on things that I used to do or things that I thought were right or the way I used to analyze data. And definitely things have changed. And I embrace that and I'm humbled by that. And then I like to support my staff and others in learning as well. So here we are. The purpose of this professional learning, I don't want to add anything. We all have massive to-do lists, constantly having more and more added to our plates. So I don't want to add another thing to your plate. Instead, I really want to help you be intentional and purposeful with the data that you're collecting, what you're doing with that data, decisions you're making with it, and really help that data just make things more efficient and effective for you and in your classroom. So analyzing data and using it to make informed decisions, we all have our different thoughts and feelings about it. Me now, I love it. I thrive off of it. I get excited about it. We are, after fall break, getting ready to dive into our winter map testing at our school, and I'm really excited. I'm excited to see student growth, the impact that our interventions and all the things that we've really been doing for our students. I'm super excited to see the data. But I know everybody doesn't feel that way. And once upon a time, I did not feel that way either. I remember when I first started at Coral, it was my first map exposure. And before that, I had never done map testing. I had never looked at the data reports. So the first time I ever looked at them, I was definitely overwhelmed and I had no clue what all of this meant, how to analyze it, and even what to do with the data. So I went to some trainings and kind of stumbled in the dark for a little while. And then I just grew and learned. And especially in the past 3 years, I've learned so much more that looking back now, I'm kind of embarrassed. Just about how clueless. I remember sitting at some parent conferences and going over RIT data, and really in my own mind, to be fully honest, I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, I know this score is low, but I don't know like what this number means. I don't know really what to do with this number. And so I was just kind of lost in communicating that with parents and what to do with that in my own classroom. So I definitely want to help you guys not to feel that way. So maybe some of you are very familiar with it. Maybe some of you are overwhelmed by it. Maybe sometimes it blows your mind. However it is that you think or feel about map data, let's share about that. So I created a little Padlet. So the link is in here, but also I created a QR code. And let's just share out, or you can type in the chat, whatever is easier for you. Just share how you feel about using your map data and making decisions with that data. And we could totally be, this is a safe place. We can be open and honest. And just let me know, how do you feel either on the Padlet or in the chat? How are you feeling about map data and using that to make decisions? So I'm already seeing some comments on our Padlet. I've avoided it a lot. It's a lot. Thank you for your honesty. I've been there. It's helpful, but I'd like to learn more. Awesome. I'm really hoping that I can help you learn some more. Seeing lots of comments in our chat, overwhelmed, confused. Some say they feel good about interpreting it, but not about using it to make decisions. Awesome. Lots of great comments coming in here, guys. Thank you so much. Definitely can relate to a lot of you of what you're saying. And even if you're a little more comfortable with pulling reports and looking at the data, maybe you're not so comfortable with actually analyzing it and using it to inform your instruction. So let's go ahead and look at one of the reasons why we're using map data in the state of Nevada. And it all has to do with our Assembly Bill 289, or Read by Grade 3. So we have our assessment requirements that we have to do. We also have our intervention services and intensive instruction that we have to provide for our students who are performing below grade level. And then we also have to do our monitoring and growth requirements to make sure those interventions are effective. So this is kind of why behind the what. So we have two main types of screeners that I want to go over with you. So we have our universal and then we have our targeted. And on MAP, we have both types, and we'll go over that quickly. But basically, a universal screener is a comprehensive screener. You're going to give it to all of your students. And typically, this is done 3 times a year. So fall, winter, and spring. It's going to assess multiple skills, so a wide range of skills. So when we give the MAP reading growth, we're looking at all of those reading skills. And then typically it's computer-based and it's adaptive. So if a student gets a question right, it's going to ask them a harder question. If they're getting it wrong, it's going to ask them an easier question. And it's adapting based off of their answers to the questions. Then we have targeted screeners. These are not necessarily given to all of your students, but they're given to just certain students. They're usually quick, especially if it's a progress monitoring. They're often just a 1-minute timed assessment, or they could be longer, but they're fewer skills. So you're just going to focus on like 1 or 2 skills usually. These could be decoding skills, or it could be word reading skills, but it's much more targeted. So instead of a wide range of reading skills, we're just going to focus in on 1 or 2 very specific skills. So those are our 2 main types of screeners. So brace yourself. Data analysis is coming. I know for me, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do the MAP testing, and then I take a lot of time and I sit down and I'm looking at my entire school's data, K through 4th grade, all of the classes, and I'm analyzing all of it. And it can be a lot. I know, especially post-pandemic, those were some crazy, scary numbers. And we're still seeing the effects of that. So data analysis. So locating your MAP growth reports, I know some of you were talking about you know how to find these reports or you're comfortable with the reports. But for those of you that maybe aren't, when you go into your NWEA MAP website, you can click on that MAP growth reports button. And the 2 that I often recommend to teachers, one is newer, the class profile report. I like this one because it's very interactive. And then the student profile report. And the class profile, you're going to be able to see all the students in your class all in one report. And then also within the class profile report, you can click on a student and it'll take you to their student profile report if you want to see more details on that particular student. So definitely, these are 2 of the reports that I recommend for teachers to be able to look at how is my class performing. Some targeted screeners that you might look at. And while I am the literacy specialist, and this is going to focus a lot on reading, I also wanted to touch on math a little bit. So if you teach both subjects or just math, a lot of this, even though I might say reading, it also applies to math. So don't feel like you don't belong here. For math, some of our targeted screeners, you might use like a math fact fluency measure. Maybe you want to see how they're doing on their addition or subtraction skills. Easy CBM website has some targeted screeners for math on there. And then for reading, some that I love to use and I highly recommend, the Press Phonics Decoding Inventory or the Phonemic Awareness Inventory. These are great if I see that a student is struggling with their reading skills. I want to know what part, diving deeper, are they really struggling with? The MAP reading fluency benchmark is a great one. I also use that one. There's also progress monitoring measures within the MAP reading fluency program that I utilize as well. And then there are PRESS, DIBELS, and Easy CBM progress monitoring measures that I also use for progress monitoring. So how do you know which students you need to give a targeted screener on? You just gave your MAP growth and you're looking at that data and you want to know which students am I giving a more targeted screener to. You're going to focus on those students that are performing below grade level, or maybe the teacher is coming to you and saying, oh, gosh, this student is really struggling in reading. I don't know what's going on. The grade level content that, we're giving them just does not, they seem to really be struggling. I don't know what the issue is. These are the students that I would give a targeted screener to. You really want to dive deeper and figure out what is the issue here? Where is the struggle at? So a student may score on grade level on their MAP growth assessment for reading, but the reading teacher might be coming to you telling you they're observing something different and they're seeing some red flags going up. So our MAP growth assessment is not our end all be all one thing. We know it's just one snapshot of a student's performance. So we definitely do not want to degrade a teacher's observations and say, they were fine. They were 60th percentile on their MAP growth. They're fine. We don't need to worry about that. No, for sure. Let's dive deeper. Let's figure this out. And then you're going to use your targeted screeners in your MAP growth data. And then you're going to want to figure out some intervention groups or what interventions you might need to do within your classroom. So you're going to analyze that data. Again, some of the reports I like to use: the class profile, the class report, and the student profile. And these are the ones that I recommend to teachers. And you're looking for same or similar skill deficits within your class to figure out what interventions. And this brings up a great point. If you see that a large chunk of your students are struggling with a skill, you don't have to figure out how to do tier 2 interventions with majority of your class. Turn that into a tier 1 intervention. Even your students that may not need that intervention and that support, they're still going to benefit from it. It's not going to hurt them. But instead of trying to pull your hair out, doing this intervention with this large group of students, you're going to do it whole group and you're going to be able to hit more students. And then for those skills that maybe a smaller portion of students need that intervention, then those are going to be your tier 2 supports. So looking at that data is really important for this as well. So even in kindergarten, we have some classes where there are still a large chunk of students that don't know their letter names and sounds. So instead of the teacher trying to do tier 2 interventions with almost all of their class, they're just still working on it. And it doesn't need to be your entire whole group lesson, but 10, 15 minutes reviewing letter names and sounds, whole group. And now I've done an intervention that could have been tier 2, but I had so many students that I chose to do it tier 1. And so looking at that data and letting it drive your tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 instruction is really important and helpful. It can help take that pressure off of you. If 80% of your students are needing a support with a skill, take the weight off of doing that in all of those small groups and do it as a tier 1 support instead. So here's an example of a class profile report and just how I would analyze it. I'm looking in those instructional areas and the RIT scores. And I'm looking at, even if the student is performing on or above grade level, what is their area of weakness that maybe I can grow them in? What is an area that maybe they're scoring much lower than other areas? And then how can I support them? So for some, it might be vocabulary, others, it might be informational text, others, it might be literary text. Depending on what grade, it could be foundational skills. So I'm just looking at those commonalities and how can I group students and support them. If I'm looking at a student profile report, some of the things that I like to look at, other than just their overall RIT score of how they performed, I'm also looking at their growth and how are they growing. This student here, their growth was in the 61st I can't talk, 61st percentile. So they're performing above grade level at the 74th, but I love seeing that their growth, they're having awesome growth. And we want to see both of those. If a student is above grade level, but their growth is really low, that's concerning to me also. So looking at those instructional areas, this student, their lowest was foundational skills. So this is a suggested area of focus, but I might also do a targeted screener on this student to figure out what foundational skills. Is it decoding or is it language comprehension? Are they struggling with phonological awareness or are they struggling with vocabulary and comprehension? So just diving deeper into what is it, what specific skills, so I know what interventions to do and how to progress monitor. So I don't want to leave those math people out. Same thing for math though. You got the same data. It's also going to give you their instructional areas. And then I'm looking at where are they performing in each of those areas. And this is a MAP growth class profile report. Again, I noticed on here, just looking at this class, I only have one student really struggling with numbers and operations, but I have several struggling with operations and algebraic thinking and measurement and data. So I could create some groups and then have those students working to support those skills. And then I know that at my campus, I'm using the MAP Reading Fluency. Maybe you're unfamiliar with it and haven't used it yet, or maybe you're already using it. But this is another great targeted screener that I use. There's a benchmark, and then there's some progress monitoring tools within this program as well. And this just shows you how to access that benchmark report. And once you click in there, you can get a report that looks something like this. This is a class's benchmark assessment report. And this shows for those foundational skills how the student performed for each one of these skills. And this helps me be able to group students. What interventions do we need to do? How can I support the student? So I look in each of these areas and I look for commonalities. How can I group students? Do I have outliers? And I use this to help me create those groups. If I click on an individual student, this is their benchmark report. This student has been flagged, which means that they're struggling with their reading skills, and definitely noticing that it's not just their decoding, but it's also their language comprehension skills that they are struggling with. And then I'm looking at like, what is their lowest area? And this can help me determine interventions for a student. So really great report, really great data. I've really enjoyed the map reading fluency. So let's go over, as we dive a little deeper, into some reading terms. Some of these are commonly confused. Some of these also, when we have parent conferences and stuff, kind of have to define them for parents also, because if I just say your student's struggling with phonological awareness, you should help them with that at home, I often find I need to define this and then give the parent examples of how they can support their student at home. So phonological awareness, that's basically all just hearing sounds. So being able to recognize, manipulate the spoken parts of words, hearing rhyme, understanding beginning sound, middle sound, ending sound, breaking syllables apart. So it's all about those sounds. And then we move into our phonemic awareness, which is understanding that spoken words are made of individual sounds, which are called phonemes. And then being able to also work with those. So our phonics is when we start to match up sounds with letters, or sometimes they're called symbols, because technically a letter is just a symbol. So it's when we're putting those two skills together, and then eventually we're able to decode and read words. So all of these are really important skills that we have to teach students, and we can do those targeted screeners to help identify areas that they might need support in. So differentiation, another skill that sometimes teachers often are like, I don't know how to do this within my classroom, or how do I know how to differentiate within my classroom? So this is a tier 1 intervention that you're doing for all of your students, and you're just tailoring the way you're giving your instruction to meet individual needs. And you can be changing the content slightly, the process, the product, your worksheet or a whiteboard, or even the learning environment. If you have a lot of EL students, you might go around and start labeling things in your classroom. This is just differentiating, helping your students, but you're helping all of them. So I just want to take a quick moment, and we're going to do a waterfall in the chat. And I know there are all sorts of different strategies and ways that we can differentiate. I want you to think in your brain for a minute, what are 1 or 2 strategies that you love to do to differentiate in your classroom? And you're going to type it in the chat, but you're not going to hit enter yet until I say. And I love to learn from other educators. I love hearing about all your awesome, wonderful, fantastic ideas. And oftentimes I go to tons of trainings and I learn things from others. And then I love to take it back to my campus and share, or I love walking into the classrooms and seeing awesome stuff happening and share it with other teachers at my campus, or go to other campuses and share. So I love learning from you guys as well. So I want you to type in the chat, what are some ways you love to differentiate your instruction? And I'll give you just a moment to type. And then I'm going to tell you to enter in 3, 2, 1. All right, hit enter and let's see those awesome ideas. Awesome. I see lots of small groups. Buddy sharing. Love that. Visuals. Yes. Allowing for movement. That's another great one. We have a lot of movement happening in our classrooms lately, because I know our friends sometimes are struggling to sit still and focus for so long. So giving those opportunities to be hands-on, to be moving around, to be talking to others, These are great strategies. Love it, you guys. Well, thank you for sharing. All right, so I saw lots of small group. That is a great way for you to differentiate. Grouping your students into groups of 2 to 6 students, and then they could be working on different activities. I know I see lots of like small groups and they're in centers and they're moving around, and sometimes you have strategies to which groups of students go to which centers based off of their needs. And you're creating those environments for student-centered learning. And you're creating an environment where students can be actively engaged in their learning and they're taking ownership. And I love seeing small groups. So great strategy. If you don't do small groups, it's something I would highly recommend. Lots of great resources out there for how to do those successfully. Interventions and intervention groups are not the same as small groups. They could be similar, but interventions, that's when you're moving into your tier 2, and now you're using that targeted screener data that you've gathered, and you're determining an intervention that needs to be done with a group of students. These are definitely, I would say, 6 or fewer students. A lot of the intervention groups that I pull, they're usually either one-on-one or maybe 4 students max, but that's like in a pull out tier 2, tier 3 situation. And I know that doesn't work for everybody's classroom, but you might just have 1 or 2 friends struggling with a skill. And so it's just going to be those 1 or 2 friends that you're pulling off to the side, and it's not for a lengthy amount of time. It can just be 10, 15 minutes. You're doing a quick intervention practice with them, and then you're sending them back and on their way. You're definitely making sure, though, that it's your data driving this intervention. And it's usually not going to be grade level material that you're doing. You're kind of setting aside your curriculum and you're just focusing on meeting a need, filling a gap. What is it that the student needs that they're not going to be getting from whole group, that our curriculum is not going to be giving them, and I'm going to give it to them in this short intervention. And Press has a lot of amazing interventions, some lessons, videos. I highly recommend presscommunity.org. I use a lot of those, but definitely a lot of different ways that you can do your interventions. And it's all just based off of the needs of your students. So how do you know what interventions to do? I briefly went over this already, but you're going to make sure that the intervention is directly linked to the skill deficit that you're identifying as you're collecting this data. And then you're going to select, you want it to be research-based and skill-specific activity or lesson. Make sure that everything is aligning, especially if the student is maybe in the SST or RTI or whatever you refer to your process as. I am always telling teachers, you know, if the data tells us this student does not know how to read CVC words, we're going to practice that during intervention group time. Then I'm going to pull a CVC word reading fluency. And every 2 weeks, we're going to progress monitor to check for growth. And then we're going to track that growth. And everything's lining up. The skill deficit they're needing support in, the intervention we're doing, and the progress monitoring, it's all on the same skill because we want to track that growth. And so it's really important that we don't just say, oh, they're really struggling with this skill. I'm going to do intervention on this other skill. And then we're going to progress monitor on this thing over here. And then we see a lot of frustration of like, oh, they're not showing growth. I don't understand. And it's because we don't have alignment. So it's really important that all those things are lining up together and we're letting that data drive it. So here's one of my favorite targeted screeners that I love to do. It's from Press. This is the phonics decoding inventory. And I love how it lays everything out for you, even the intervention recommendation, recommended score of what they should be getting. And so if I have a teacher that comes to me and says, I think I have a student struggling with decoding, I'll give this targeted screener, and then I can come back and say, you are so right. We should really work on their digraphs with short vowels. And then we practice that for a few weeks in intervention and we progress monitor. And then usually the student masters that skill. And then we can move on to the next skill. Or sometimes that was the hiccup and now we are a great fluent reader. So that is definitely the goal. We don't want them to be receiving tier 2 interventions for an entire school year. So it's making sure that we target that skill so we can get them in and then get them back out. So how do you know if the intervention is working? Well, that's where your progress monitoring comes in. And that's why it's really important that your progress monitoring aligns with your interventions and your data. So again, if we identify a student struggling with CVC words, we work on that in intervention, we practice that, and then we do a CVC word reading fluency measure with them every few weeks, and we're tracking that data. And then when they show mastery, then we exit them. But also if we decide, wow, there's no growth happening here, then we start to look in like, do we need to change our intervention and how we're practicing this skill? Is there maybe something else going on here? So that progress monitoring really helps us, again, make those decisions. And you do have to take a bite of some humble pie sometimes. I know it's hard for me because I'll be like, this is such an amazing intervention. I don't understand why it's not working. And then I just have to do what's best for the student and change things up a little bit. And then oftentimes I'll start to see that growth. So it's not always a one size fits all for every single student. Some might need more tactile, some love the singing and the song. So whatever method of intervention works for that student, let that data drive that. So again, your progress monitoring should be data-based. It should be skill-specific. Press has a lot of amazing tools, but also we can use other resources. So determining which progress monitoring measure, you're going to base that off of your targeted screeners that you've done. So like the phonics inventory that you might do, or the benchmark for map reading fluency, whatever targeted measure, that's going to help you determine which progress monitoring measure that you're going to use for a student. So here's some common ones that I hear. I took a survey from lots of teachers, and then also I looked at what we use at our campus. So Press, I use a lot of their progress monitoring measures. Map reading fluency we utilize at our school, and I know is growing in popularity in Nevada. Also, Easy CBM, I get a lot of feedback of teachers utilizing that tool, and also Dibbles. I know there are lots of resources and tools out there, so maybe you've heard of these, maybe you've never heard of them. Odds are you use something different also that I haven't listed here. That doesn't make it wrong. Just making sure that it is really targeted to the skill, making sure that it's easy for teachers and easy for analyzing, making sure that you are able to progress monitor using research-based assessment tools. That's really important. I know you can find lots of amazing resources on Teachers Pay Teachers, but not all of them would I highly recommend. So just make sure you do a little bit of research. And then you're reassessing and analyzing. So we do those universal screeners 3 times a year. You're doing progress monitoring multiple times in between. So you're constantly assessing and tracking data on all of your students. But obviously, if they're in tier 2 or tier 3, you're doing this more frequently and looking at that data more frequently. And then you're constantly analyzing that data and letting it drive your decisions. So the whole process is just an ongoing year-long process of collecting data, analyzing it, intervening when needed, and then reassessing, reanalyzing, and going on and on. So I know that analyzing the data, for a lot of you, you were saying it was really overwhelming. It was to me when I first started out, so please don't feel like you are alone. There's lots of others. When I asked you at the beginning of how you feel about all of this, we're like, eh. Hopefully this has helped you a little bit. I understand there is so many ins and outs and just different scenarios. I'm constantly at my campus working with teachers and guiding them and helping them make decisions. So I would definitely say this is also a team effort. So I hope you have somebody at your campus, whether it's a grade level lead, a literacy specialist, an SST coordinator, that you could team up with and help you if you're having any issues. But definitely using your data to make decisions is no easy task. I feel more fluent now than I did before, but I took for granted sometimes until I stepped into this position of like, oh yeah, you know, of course, when you see this on their report, you know, it means you should do this. And then as I got to working with teachers, I realized that wasn't so easy for everybody to analyze and come up with the same conclusion. And so that just really inspired me of like, I want to help them. I want to help them not be overwhelmed. I want to help them not be paralyzed by their data and scared or unsure of what to do, because the more I could help my staff, the more students I could impact. Because if I can help the teachers can better help their students. And so it really lit a fire under me for really helping teachers all over Nevada now to be able to do this and feel more successful in doing so. So I want to give you a moment. I am not the professional at everything. I'm not the expert. Oftentimes my teachers come to me and ask me questions and I tell them I will try to find the answer to that. But maybe I already have the answer, maybe not. But I want to give you a moment to ask any questions that you might have. And again, I may not have the answer. But what questions, if any, do you have? And go ahead and type them in our chat. And I will take a minute to look. Any questions? I see, are there map reading fluency for kindergarten? Yes. It starts off, I believe, at preschool. And my campus is 4th grade, but I do believe it goes beyond 4th grade also. So yes, you could use map reading fluency for kindergarten. And I do it with the kindergartners at our school, and it's really wonderful. Do I start with the benchmark? Yes, you will have to give everybody the map reading fluency benchmark first. and then it will give you your data, and then you can assign a progress monitoring measure. So there's either oral reading fluency, progress monitoring, phonological awareness, or phonics, and you can assign whichever one. And for some of mine, I will switch them back and forth. So like some of my 3rd and 4th graders, I know they're struggling with phonics. So 1 week I'll progress monitor for phonics, and then the next week I'll make them do oral reading fluency. So definitely you can do that. Is the achievement percentile a comparison from the previous MAP score and the achievement percentile? Yes. If we're talking about MAP growth, yes. The achievement percentile is based off of the national norms, and then the growth is based off of their previous MAP growth and then their projected. But it definitely is really helpful data. We want to see high growth and high achievement in our students. What else? What available small group resources were you referring to earlier? When you take the, in MAP reading fluency, when you take the benchmark, you can even go in the report and it will recommend, there's hyperlinks in there. You can even click on it. Say they were struggling with phonics, you can click on it and it will take you to some phonics activities that you can do. So it gives you lots of great resources. Sometimes my teachers will use it for interventions or small groups. Other times they'll differentiate homework and they'll send it home, and the parents can do those at home. So definitely some great resources you can get through there. This is a long one. Let's see. How do you interpret individual skills on the student profile report for the categories? If you click on the different categories in the student profile report, it can take you, it's a very long list, but it'll take you to, and you can click on it, it's interactive, and it will tell you like what skills they're ready to be introduced to. And it will list out like the different standards and skills. And that is very helpful also for determining which skills you want to practice in your intervention groups. If a student is in the 14th percentile, what does that mean? They are definitely performing below grade level. Depending on what grade they're in, I would definitely do a targeted screener to see what their decoding skills are like. Odds are they're probably struggling with decoding and reading, but I would definitely recommend doing a targeted screener. I usually, most of my students performing in the 21st percentile or below on MAP reading growth fall into our tier 3 interventions. So definitely needing some support. How do you interpret individual skills on the student profile report for the categories? Reinforcing, I would identify that one. I kind of explain it to my teachers. If it's saying reinforce, that's like approaching grade level, or like we're kind of getting there. If it's developing, it's kind of developing different skills. So they still haven't shown like complete mastery in it. Introducing is like what they're ready for next. So kind of like what's coming. So it just kind of depends on how you want to group them. But definitely doing those targeted screeners really helps you get more specific data. a lot of times I don't just look at the student profile reports and stop there. It kind of helps me determine which targeted screener to give them so that I know what skill I'm kind of diving a little bit deeper into. How would you explain 14th percentile to a parent? I wouldn't just explain to them 14th percentile. Again, I would suggest you do some targeted screeners and determine what skills, and then I would explain those skills to the parents. And that way you can more properly tell them how they're struggling and how they can support their student, which is the most important thing. So I don't like to just say, oh, your student's performing below grade level, but like I want to attach skills to that and tell them like how they can support their student. So let's really practice on those digraphs at home. And then a lot of times I will give them resources. And a lot of times I like to find videos on like reading rockets for parents and let them watch videos, even if it's reading fluency of like, a lot of them are like, oh, I just give my kid a book and tell them to go read for 30 minutes. But like teaching parents how to like actually engage with that is really important. Let's see. Can I put my contact information? Yes. And I have a link. I'm going to put it in here for the handout, which will have some of the slides on it. And then it will have my email, but I'm also going to type my email in here.
While you're doing that, Bridget, I'm just going to remind everyone that the attendance has been posted, as well as the link for the survey for this session. The next session, there's no session, and then there's no session 3 in this room. So that means in order to attend another session, you'd have to go to another room. Unfortunately, the next presenter had canceled. We appreciate your attendance today. If you had any issues, then please let me know. I'd like to thank Bridget for giving a great presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.